One of the things we did for this documentary was take a trip out to Long Beach Comic Con. Even though I'd been a fan for years, I'd never been to a Comic Con before, so it was a really cool experience. Going to Comic Con for the first time, I think it's really cool to think about what it really means. Our culture has sort of accepted what it means to be a geek, to be a comic book lover. I sat down with some of the professors at my school, Cal State Long Beach. Adam Moore, a screenwriter and video game writer who also wrote the graphic novel Vendor, published in 2008 by Viper Comics. Amy D'Souza, another professor who teaches the comic book class, but she also wrote her thesis on the Vertigo series Fables, The Unwritten, and Animal Man. And Bonnie Blackburn, an author and screenwriter who teaches screenwriting and fiction theory courses at the school. Chris Shaw, a comp lit professor who primarily teaches the comp lit class, comic books and graphic novels.
I do think there's a certain type of person that becomes a fan of graphic novels. But I think that audience is expanding. I think it's traditionally the male audience. I think that we are seeing that audience expand for a variety of reasons.
You know, I think it's more that there is a perception that there's a certain type of person that becomes the fan of the graphic novels. When you ask people, they assume it's children, adolescent men, or men who haven't grown up.
Kids. Well, I mean, I think it starts for a lot of people in youth, and it's very accessible to go from that into longer form reading. But some people just keep going into comics and then graphic novels, and it's become more literary.
To me, there's certain kinds of communities that are tied to graphic novels, and I think that creates a much sort of stronger bond around certain texts or genres or traditions. It creates a conversation around the tradition that I think certain people gravitate towards.
They think all people who read comics are cosplayers. Not that cosplaying is a bad thing, but that people kind of associate those two things so closely because they are related. But they assume that if you're doing one, you must be doing the other.
Comic book culture has taken over our culture. And so when you have a young woman who wants to engage in culture, she ends up in comic books because that's where everyone is. Everyone's at the conventions and things like that.
Really what it is that there's a perception that there's a certain type of person who's going to pick up and read a graphic novel, and really the amount of subject matter that's out there, there's probably something for everybody.
But I also think the content is changing. We're trying to have more content that's directed towards a female audience as well as a male audience.
I think if you got hooked in childhood, you might have continued that love. Maybe there are people who come to it as adults because they like the characters, they have an appreciation of art.
These are places where people like me, or really more exuberant, even more into it than I am, can go and be themselves. And I think that's really great that there's a place where you can do that and be accepted.